Hey guys, in today's video, we're going to talk about the cost of living in New Hampshire and try to determine if it's still an affordable place to live. So right now I have bestplaces.net pulled up, and we're going to take a look at New Hampshire here and just kind of go through some of the basics that you'll generally see if you're comparing different states. Now, as you can see on the chart here, they compare New Hampshire to the national average. The number used to represent the US average is 100, as you can see on the right-hand side here. And then we can compare that to New Hampshire's figures on the left. So first thing we'll start off with, since that's generally one of the biggest concerns for people when they're moving to a new area, and that's the cost of housing. And as you can see here, the cost of housing is significantly higher than the US average. We're at a 122.4 compared to 100. And then you see just below that, $421,300 compared to the US average of $338,100. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to switch over to another tab, and we're going to look at something that's very important that I think gets overlooked a lot of times, and that's the median income in the state. Now you can see that this is for 2020, and it could be slightly higher now in 2023, but this is kind of a baseline we can go off of. We can take into account the household income, and then the individual income or the per capita income. So as you can see here, it's showing for household income $77,923, whereas for an individual it's $37,025. If we take that number into account when comparing it to the median home price, it might be hard to justify relocating to New Hampshire, especially if you're going to be in the lower income bracket. Whereas a lot of people that might be moving here, whether they're working remotely and they're bringing a job from another state, if they're in tech or whatever it might be, marketing, and they have a high six-figure salary, it might not be a concern. So what we're going to do here is go over to Zillow, and we're going to take a look at the median home price in the state right now. And it's $421,015. It's a 9.8% increase over the last year. Now, this doesn't paint a true picture in my opinion. You might look at this number and it seems somewhat realistic and reasonable, but it's taken into account a lot of these small towns throughout the state or some of these smaller cities. Now, if we were to look at it on a case-by-case basis and kind of dial into some of these more populated areas that actually tend to attract people, like the Manchester, a Nashua, a Concord, a Bedford, a Londonderry, Wyndham, all these particular locations, you'd see that the median home price is significantly higher. For instance, in a place like Wyndham, you're looking well over $750,000 for a median home price. Now, what we're going to do here to kind of illustrate the point is look at a mortgage calculator. And now this is somewhat inaccurate. The best way to get a realistic number is obviously to speak to a mortgage lender, and they can obviously run all of your information and figure out based on your financial situation what would be a realistic number that you could actually qualify for. But what we're going to do here is, since we know that the median home price in the state is $421,000, we're going to plug that number in here. Then just below that for the down payment, we're not going to do 20% because I will assume that many people don't have 20% to put down. A more realistic number, in my opinion, could be an FHA loan where you could put as little as 3.5% down, but that's all going to depend on your credit score and your DTI. Also, with a conventional loan, it is possible to put as little as 3% down, but what I'm going to do for the sake of this video is put 3.5% down. And then if we go to the interest rate, obviously that's fluctuating a lot, but let's just put it on the higher end and say 7%, based on the time that I'm filming this video, which is at the end of March 2023. We'll go with a 30-year fixed loan here. And then down here for the property taxes, once again, this is going to vary significantly depending on where you purchase a property. But considering that the median property tax in the state is upwards of around $5,500 a year, which is paid semi-annually, we're just going to plug in 5,500 as a round number. As for PMI, I'll leave that at 0.5% as it already had there, which could vary. And it does fluctuate depending on how much you're putting down, what type of loan you're using. But I think to be conservative, we'll stick with that number. And then for home insurance, I generally see at least $1,500 a year, so we'll up it to that. And then as far as HOAs go, they're not very common in the state, so I'm not going to include one here. And then we're also going to go FHA here, since we're going to be doing 3.5% down. And then we will click calculate. So as you can see over here on the right hand side, it's going to break it all down. So payment with PMI, $3,455.50. That's significant, especially when we go back to this and consider that $37,025 is the per capita income. Now, you can do the basic math. If we break that down on a monthly basis, then a weekly basis, and then you take into account, taxes, it's going to be very, very difficult for someone making that type of income to qualify for a property at this price point. Even if you're making the median household income, if you have multiple people living in the home, it's probably still going to be cutting it close right now. Now, if we go back and we adjust one factor in here, and it's solely the interest rate, and let's just say we bring that back down to 5% if rates were to drop over the coming months and calculate that, it doesn't bring it down significantly, but it's definitely noticeable, $2,933.53. So it's upwards of about $500 per month cheaper. Although, when you still look at that number, that's significant compared to what you would pay for rent. Now, we're going to look at that. So if we go over to this chart here, and now these numbers might be a little bit outdated. These are dating back to 2022, I believe. But these are somewhat accurate. I don't think the rental rates have gone up that much over the past year. These are some of the more popular areas. Now, there's a lot of other areas that you can rent, but we'll just base it off of these numbers here. A couple of the spots that I want to point out would be Manchester. And the reason I bring up Manchester a lot is because it's the most populated city in the state. It's obviously going to have a lot of the employers, major employers, and it has a lot of amenities and shopping and things like that. So even if you're not a fan of Manchester, you don't want to live there, you will probably find yourself visiting the city regularly to just accomplish daily tasks. So as we can see here, the average one-bedroom rent is almost $1,500. And then for a two-bedroom, $1,700. Now, if we go back to the mortgage calculator, and this was at 5%, we'll put this back to 7% since that's more realistic. We were looking at almost $3,500 a month. And that's the reason why so many people are almost forced to rent, because the cost of purchasing a home has become so inflated. Now, if we look at another city in the state, basically the cutoff to southern New Hampshire, so Concord, which is also the capital, it tends to be a little bit more affordable, as you can see here, just about $1,300 for a one-bedroom, and just over $1,600 a month for a two-bedroom. Now, that might be a little bit more realistic, especially if you're coming from another large city in the U.S. where home prices and rental rates were relatively high. But if you're coming from a smaller city, let's just say like in North Carolina or somewhere in the Midwest, these are probably going to be really high numbers for you. So before you move here, if you are going to rent or if you're going to purchase a home, definitely want to take into account what the cost of living is and compare that to what your income will be. So as you can see, I'll touch on it, but it's not an area that a lot of people gravitate to just solely based on the cost of living in that particular city. Even though it's a very beautiful area, Portsmouth, almost $1,800 per month for a one-bedroom, $2,900 a month for a two-bedroom. If we were to look at the median home price there, you're getting in the high six figures. It's not uncommon to see property for $1 million and well over that. Now, the next thing we're going to take a look at is another website here, which will actually illustrate some of the rentals that are currently available in the area so you can see the numbers. Now, you can see here the first listings in Hooksett, which I personally like. It's just between Concord and Manchester, and it's showing that there's 14 units available. Now, that might give you the wrong impression that the rental market isn't strong right now, but I can tell you from personal experience helping clients that have come here in the past or recently that the market for rentals is still pretty competitive. So if you see something like this, that might not be accurate. As far as the price goes, it's unlikely that that's going to fluctuate too much over the next year or so. But you can see for a two-bedroom, you're upwards of, $1,600 here. If we scroll down, we have some in Manchester. A lot of the newer places in Manchester, especially as you get closer to Elm Street, as you can see here, you're going to be close to the 2,000 mark or above. And you can see that right here. Even at a one-bedroom, you're approaching 2,000. Now, Country Club Drive, I know exactly where that is. It's a little bit further out from the city, a little bit closer to Dunbarton and Hooksett. Not a bad area whatsoever. It would still work if you were going to be commuting to downtown Manchester, but you're going to get a little bit more affordable rent in that area. And you can see a 1-bedroom, $1,700, and then 2-bedroom almost $2,000. Now you can't be super picky. I mean, you can see from the picture here that they're not super modern. You don't have granite countertops and stainless appliances, beautiful backsplashes. That's what you're going to get in these places closer to downtown that have, been remodeled or just built, but you're going to pay a huge premium for that. And then this is a good example here to show you what you'll find in the heart of downtown. So when you get into those inner city streets that I've talked about in some of my previous videos, some of the not so desirable areas, this would be a example of that. So you can see it's a 2-bedroom. Now it's $1,750, so that's significantly more affordable than the other properties, but these are the older multifamily buildings. So if you're looking for a very modern kind of upscale area, this probably wouldn't be that. Somebody that's looking for a property like this might have multiple children and they need something affordable that has more than 1 bedroom. And that's kind of the demographic you tend to see in that particular area. These buildings are often owned by individual investors as well. So opposed to some of these large ones you'll find downtown or along the river where they're owned by large property management companies, these ones you might be dealing directly with the landlord. And now, as you can see, we could just continue going through these listings, and I'm sure there's plenty to look through, but I just wanted to give you kind of a brief overview of what you could expect. Now, if we go back to the chart for the cost of living, we've really touched on the housing right now. Another one that comes in actually slightly below the US average is transportation. Now, there could be a few reasons why this is the case. One being that New Hampshire is actually a relatively small state as far as the area where most of the population resides, meaning you won't spend that much time in your car driving from point A to point B. And on top of that, you're not really going to be stuck in traffic. So that probably drops it slightly. It's common knowledge that registration in New Hampshire is quite expensive for cars. And what we're going to do to illustrate that is go over to Manchester City Hall's website. And I know not everyone's going to be living in Manchester, but just because of the fact that it is the hub of southern New Hampshire, we're going to use this for the example. Now, off to the right-hand side, there's a tool that you can estimate the vehicle's registration costs. We're going to assume that it's a new resident here. We're going to go next here. We'll say that you're going to be getting new license plates because you're just moving here. What type of plate? We're going to just go with a traditional passenger. And you can see there's a lot to select from if you're going to have a motorcycle or whatever it might be. Now, it gives you two options as far as what you want to input for information here. The first one, I'm actually going to put in the list price, so the MSRP, the model year of the vehicle. Now, this actually does play a big role. So the gross weight, and if you're not familiar with this, the majority of vehicles on the road today will be over the 3,000 mark. And you see that they have it, it's 3,001 up to 5,000. There's very few cars that are below the 3,000 pounds, which would reduce your registration somewhat. So we're just going to assume that you're not going to have a huge truck or SUV in this case, and you're going with more of that, traditional sedan, maybe a Toyota Corolla or a Camry or a Honda Civic. So we'll go with that one there. As for MSRP, it's hard to pick a specific number, but based on the way that car prices are going these days, I'm going to put in a conservative number of $25,000. And this is based off the cost of a new vehicle. So we'll say 2023 for the year. And then for this one, we're just going to select the first option if you were purchasing it through a dealership. And we'll assume that you're registering the vehicle to a person and not a business. And then let's just say that your birth month is in January. Click agree here. And as you can see, it gives you an estimated cost, which is actually fairly accurate. Now you can see $477.60. And then if we look right up here to the duration, this isn't even for a full 12-month period. This is 11 months, and it expires on January 31st, 2024. So as we can see from this example, depending on where you're coming from, the cost of just registering a vehicle is significant. So that leads me into my next point. Maybe you're thinking, well, I'm not going to purchase a new car because the cost is just too high. Now, I have Craigslist pulled up here, and obviously there's many places you can search for used cars, but I just wanted to give you an idea of what you'd be looking at in this area. And keep in mind, we don't have sales tax, so that does help whether you're looking to buy a new or used car. But what I wanted to do is use an economy car for this example, opposed to using something more luxurious like a Mercedes-Benz or a BMW, which the majority of people probably aren't looking to purchase. So as you can see right now, they're filtered on here as all, which means these could be from dealerships and owners, which gives you a better example of what the prices could be. So you're looking, for a 2012, 13, something that's about 7 to 10 years old, and you're going to be in that $10,000 to $13,000 price range. If you're okay with something a little bit higher mileage, you might be able to go below 10, but that just gives you kind of an idea. And I'm sure car prices are fairly similar from state to state, but in general, the one thing you want to keep in mind when looking at used cars in New Hampshire is rust, because we do salt the roads in the wintertime. It can be very hard on your vehicle, opposed to other states down south or on the west coast where they have warm weather year round, and they don't have to really deal with inclement weather as far as snow and ice goes. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Now, if we go back to the chart on bestplaces.net, another column that we want to look at is utilities. And as you can see, they're significantly above the US average. Now, the cost of utilities in the wintertime are significantly higher due to the fact that it gets very, very cold and you will be using your heating system continuously. It's basically the opposite of what happens in the West Coast or some of these really hot states where you're using your AC all summer long. The thing is, in New Hampshire, you could be using your AC a significant period of time in combination with the fact that you are going to be using your heat all winter long. Now, there's alternatives if you have a wood-burning fireplace or a pellet stove, but in general, if you have a furnace or a boiler, your cost is going to be somewhat similar. Now, one thing that happened over the past year was the fact that utility prices started to increase significantly. If we look at Google here at some of these headlines, you'll see that Eversource being one of the main electric companies in the area, Unitil here, they all requested increases for their current rates. You'll see that this increase resulted in bills upwards of $70 higher. And I believe that was on a monthly basis. So keep that in mind. If you're looking at a larger home, it's going to be a lot more costly to keep warm in the wintertime and cool in the summertime. Now, the final thing we're going to look at is healthcare. Obviously, you'll see groceries on here, which is very person dependent, depending on your eating habits, where you like to shop. I will mention we have an array of grocery stores from Hannaford's to Shaw's to Whole Foods to Trader Joe's. So depending on what you're looking for, we should have it here. Now, if we go over to another slide here, we're going to look at what the median cost of health insurance is in the Granite State. If we zoom in on this first article here, you'll see that the average resident in New Hampshire pays about $371 per person, and that's per month. So that's a significant expense, even though healthcare comes in quite a bit lower than the US average. So in summary, New Hampshire isn't the most expensive state in the country to live, but it isn't the cheapest. So one thing to keep in mind is that if you are going to purchase a home, you want to make sure that your income will be high enough to qualify for a property even at the median home price in the state. Hopefully this video doesn't come off as me trying to discourage you from moving to the Granite State. I just want to give you a realistic example and expectation of what it's like to live here. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I appreciate you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.